My name is Rebecca Bessie. I'm the planning director for the city of Steamboat Springs. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. We have a couple of folks here in the room, and then it looks like a good number online have joined by way of Zoom. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and walk through a presentation. I think we'll have plenty of time at the end for any questions, both for the folks here in the room as well as those of you who are online. So when we get to the end, we'll raise hands and go ahead and take some questions. So we'll get started. Be mindful of everybody's time today. All right. Hopefully everyone online can see my screen. As I said, I'm Rebecca Bessie. I'm the planning director. Samantha Harless is our short-term rental compliance officer, and she may be joining us online as well shortly. We are here to provide an overview of the short-term rental overlay zone and licensing process and answer any questions that you have. Trying really hard to walk everyone through this process. I know it doesn't feel easy and there's probably a lot of questions out there still. So we want to be a resource for all of you and answer your questions today. I'm going to cover the definitions of short-term rentals. Talk a little bit about the overlay zone, what the zones are, what they mean in the different areas of town. We'll focus on the legal nonconforming registration process, as well as the licensing process, who can get a license, what's going to be required to get a license, and what that application process will look like. And then, as I already said, we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. If you haven't already visited our website, please do so. We're trying to keep this up to date, add updates, add new questions and answers as we get them to this website, steamboatsprings.net/STR. So this is where you will find the most up-to-date information, any necessary forms that you need for the different application processes, and contact information for Samantha as well. Okay, so some of you may know under our prior code, we had a couple of definitions and a permit process for something that we called a vacation home rental. We also had a definition of a vacation rental. So the VHR, the vacation home rental, was a short-term rental of a single family home or a duplex unit. The vacation rental was defined as being anything outside of a single family home or a duplex. So a condo, townhome, any kind of multiple family residential unit was defined as a vacation rental. We also had a definition of a temporary short-term rental, which was allowed for limited occurrences of short-term rentals in a single family home or a duplex without the need for a permit. So under the new code, these definitions went away and we adopted a new set of definitions. I'm not going to read these to you, but they are on the screen as adopted in our municipal code. Most of the short-term rentals in our community will fall under this definition of a short-term rental. It's basically the entire dwelling unit is being used for short-term rental purposes. That's for a period of time of less than 30 days. And it is occurring when the owner or the occupant of that unit is not present. So it's not a shared space, it's a whole unit rental. We also have a definition for what we call a hosted short-term rental. This is where there's one guest room located in a dwelling unit, and that single guest room is what is being rented on the short-term basis, so less than 30 days. Think of this as sort of the original Airbnb concept where you would rent your spare bedroom while you are also residing in the home. There are some limitations on this type of a use, and that being that guest room cannot exceed 400 square feet in size, and it cannot be, the hosted short-term rental cannot be used as a means to rent a secondary unit or an accessory dwelling unit or mother-in-law apartment in your home as a short-term rental. So it's truly just a guest room, bedroom, bathroom, that kind of thing. And then as of last night, City Council actually amended the short-term rental codes to incorporate back in this temporary short-term rental concept. It's a little bit different than what existed under the previous code, and that it only applies to primary residences. So any type of dwelling unit that serves as somebody's primary residence where they reside, if they're gone for an extended period of time on vacation, they can rent their home, their dwelling unit on a temporary basis as a short-term rental. And the restrictions that are in place on that type of a use are that it is for a maximum of 2 times a year or up to 30 cumulative days per calendar year, whichever of those is more restrictive. So it's truly just a very limited temporary nature of a short-term rental in a primary residence only. The overlay zones, you've probably heard us talk about these in terms of green, yellow, and red. The actual adopted titles of those overlay zones are here on this slide. There's a zone A, the unrestricted zone, zone B, restricted, and that is comprised of 6 subzones that are numbered B1 through B6. And then zone C is the prohibited zone. That's what's shown in red on the map. And we'll talk a little bit about what each of those zones mean as we walk through this. So zone A, the unrestricted zone, that's the green areas. They're primarily located around the resort as well as the commercial core downtown. In these areas, a license is required for a short-term rental use. However, there are no limits on the number of licenses that will be available. And there are some basic operational requirements that will apply, and we'll go over those a little bit later in the presentation. Zone B, the restricted or yellow areas, short-term rentals are allowed here with a license. There are a limited number of licenses that will be available in each of those subzones. So those are the caps that we talk about. There is an exception to those caps, and I'll get to that on the next slide, but generally speaking, the concept is that the short-term rentals are allowed in the yellow zones with a certain cap on the number of licenses that we would issue. Hosted short-term rentals and temporary short-term rentals are not subject to those caps. So we will issue an unlimited number of licenses for those types of uses. And again, there's some minimum operational requirements that will apply to all short-term rental uses in the yellow zones. The caps for each of those subzones is shown here on this slide. So you can see the numbers are fairly low per subzone. And then in red at the bottom, you'll see that big exception that I talked about. So we anticipate that we will likely exceed the caps in all but one subzone. And that is because we will issue a short-term rental license to every property that is subject to a valid VHR permit from the prior code, or that has registered as a legal non-conforming short-term rental. And that's going to be the process we're going to talk about next in the presentation. But if you fall within one of those 2 categories and you're located in the yellow zone, you will be eligible to receive a short-term rental license, even if it means that we will exceed the caps set for those subzones. All licenses issued will count toward the cap. So again, we will exceed those caps, and over time, we hope that as those uses go away, that we will get down to below the cap, at or below the caps in each subzone. If a cap is not met per subzone, then we will issue licenses through a lottery system, and we will provide the public with 30-day notice, a 30-day notice period by which they can submit their application to be included in the lottery. And then we will issue licenses based on the results of those lotteries. We do not intend to maintain wait lists for any of the subzones until such time as we anticipate that a license will become available. And I'll explain why that is. In some of these subzones, we expect to grossly exceed the cap. And so it's going to take probably quite some time for those licenses to turn over and a brand new license to be made available to property that had not previously been issued a short-term rental license. And given that that could take years to happen, maintaining a wait list and trying to track down property owners that may not own the property any longer when that license does become available seems like a not a productive use of everyone's time. And so again, we do not intend to maintain a wait list until such time as we think that there's going to be a license available in one of those subzones. And then we will do some public notice to make everyone aware that a license is coming available. Zone C, the red zones. Again, here the concept is of the overlay, the concept is that short-term rentals are generally prohibited in these areas. Again, there's a big exception there that we will issue licenses to properties that have a valid VHR permit or that are registered as legal non-conforming short-term rentals, meaning they've done it in the past lawfully. So again, we will be issuing licenses to properties in the red zones. We just will not be issuing licenses to properties that have never been used lawfully as a short-term rental previous to June 15th of 2022. The exception to that prohibition is for hosted short-term rentals and temporary short-term rentals. Those will be allowed, and we will issue an unlimited number of licenses for those types of uses. And again, any short-term rental use that is subject to a license will be held to some minimum operational requirements. In summary, this slide illustrates that overlay zone concept. You can see the green zone, there's no cap on the number of licenses. The yellow zone, there are caps. In the red zone, there are prohibitions, with the footnote at the bottom there that in both the yellow and the red zones, the exceptions to those caps or prohibitions will be for hosted short-term rentals, temporary short-term rentals, or properties with VHR permits or that are registered legal non-conforming short-term rentals. So there's a number of avenues by which property owners in the yellow and the red zone may be eligible to receive a short-term rental license. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about legal non-conforming registration. We have received over 200, I think around 250 or so legal non-conforming registration applications. If you are on joining this meeting and you have already submitted your application and you're wondering why you haven't heard from us, it's because we're working through them as fast as we can and trying to approve them review and approve them as quickly as possible. But that's just proving to take some time given the sheer quantity of them. So please be patient with us. It is a process. And this process is only applicable to properties in zones B and C. So that's the red and the yellow zones. Of course, if you're in the green zone, you don't need to go through this process because short-term rentals continue to be allowed by right. And so there's no need to register as legal non-conforming. To be eligible in the yellow and the red zones, you will need to have operated a short-term rental prior to June 15th of this year. And that operation of that use will have to have been lawful, meaning it had to have been established in accordance with the prior codes of the city. And you will have to demonstrate that the short-term rental use was not abandoned within the 12 months prior to June 15th. So what that means is you have to show us that you've been using the property between June 15th of 2021 and June 15th of 2022 as a lawful short-term rental. Something that happened 5 years ago will not be considered in the non-conforming registration process. If your property is subject to a valid VHR permit, this process is not applicable. You do not need to register as non-conforming if you have a VHR permit. And if that VHR permit was renewed and valid as of June 15th, 2022. The application process requires a couple of documents. The first is a property owner's signature form. All of the owners of the property have to sign the form. So if there's more than what can fit on here, then additional pages can be attached. And this form is available for download on that short-term rental website that I showed you at the very beginning of the presentation. This form also includes a list of these submittal requirements. So you'll have that to refer to. The second document that's required in the application is proof of ownership. This can include a printout of the county assessor's page showing that you in fact own the property, or any other documentation, could be a deed, something demonstrating that you own the property. And again, the most simple way to do this is to refer to the county assessor's page. This is just a screenshot of the property of the building that I'm standing in today. And you can see it clearly indicates who the owner of the property is and what the address of that property is. So if that information is accurate, we will accept a screenshot or a PDF of this county assessor's page to satisfy that ownership documentation. The third and fourth application requirements often come in the form of one document, is what we're seeing. So what we're asking for is some sort of proof of bookings that the property was actually booked and used as a short-term rental prior to June 15th, 2022, when the new code went into effect. And the fourth is proof of sales tax collection and remittance. Because if you remember, I had indicated that the property had to be used lawfully as a short-term rental. And that includes the collection and remittance of the required sales tax and lodging taxes. So there's a couple of different means by which you can demonstrate that the tax has been collected and remitted. And it depends on sort of the situation of the individual property and listing. It could take the form of an affidavit. We'll accept a copy of your sales tax license. Or what we're seeing most often from folks are copies of an Airbnb or Vrbo report. And I'll show you what those look like or what to be looking for to download from those two platforms. That typically provides all the information that we need to prove that the property was in fact booked and used for a stay and that those taxes were collected and remitted to the city. So for example, the affidavit, again, this affidavit is available for download on our website. This affidavit works. It's something that you would complete and sign, attesting that the statements on the form are in fact true and accurate. This would satisfy this requirement if someone else is collecting and remitting sales tax on your behalf, and that somebody else was somebody other than Vrbo or Airbnb. So an example of this would be if you contract with a property management company that advertises your property and therefore collects and remits the sales tax to the city on your behalf, then your property manager would be able to complete this affidavit for you and you could submit this with your application. If you collect and remit the sales tax yourself on your own behalf, a simple copy of your city sales tax license would be sufficient. And then the most common example that I referred to is the report that includes the tax information that comes directly from one of the two major platforms. On the right side of this slide, I have the actual name of the report that you would be looking to download or contact one of these platforms to email this report to you. For Vrbo, it's called a complete lodging tax report. Airbnb calls it a complete booking report. That would provide a list of all of the bookings within a certain time frame, the gross, the amount that the listing, the amount that the property was listed for and booked for, and then how much of the different lodging and sales taxes were collected associated with each of those individual bookings. The reason why we'll accept this report directly from these two platforms is because the city has a voluntary collection agreement with both of these platforms by which they have agreed to collect the taxes from the guests through their platform and remit those directly to the city on behalf of all of the hosts. And so we know we can trust that we are in fact getting the taxes collected when they go through Vrbo and Airbnb. Once you've submitted your legal nonconforming registration application, and once that's been approved, that approval runs with the land. So if you sell the property, the new owner does not have to go through that process again. You don't even have to contact us. That approval is associated with the address and the parcel ID number for that particular property. Our records will document that, in fact, that property was registered as a legal nonconforming short-term rental. However, that approval may not last forever. It would terminate upon abandonment of the use for any 12-month period of time. So if you stop using your property as a short-term rental for 12 months, that approval will be void, will expire. If you sell the property and the new owner decides not to use it as a short-term rental, after 12 months, that approval will expire and they will no longer be considered a legal nonconforming use, and would, if they're in the yellow and the red zones, may not be able to obtain a short-term rental license in the future. So we are accepting these applications. Like I said, we've had over, I think, 250 that have been submitted. We have approved so far about half of those, and Samantha is working through those as quickly as she can to get those all approved in short order. More information about this, what I've covered, as well as those forms that I've referred to, the affidavit, the signature form, can all be found on the short-term rental website. And there is actually a page specific to the legal nonconforming registration process that I would refer you all to if you have additional questions. All right, and then we'll shift gears to licensing. This is sort of the next step in the process for some properties. So what properties would be eligible for a short-term rental license? The answer to that question depends on what overlay zone the property is located in. If they're in the green zone, all properties are eligible. Like I said at the beginning, there's no limit on the number of licenses that we would issue. If the property is located in the yellow zone, zone B, any of those subzones of zone B, properties that will be issued a short-term rental license first will be those that are subject to a valid VHR permit, or those that have registered as legal nonconforming short-term rentals. So those that have gone through that process that we just talked about. If after all of those licenses have been issued to those first two eligible types of properties, and if the cap in that subzone has not been met, then other properties would be eligible to apply for a license. Hosted short-term rentals and temporary short-term rentals will always be eligible for a license. In Zone B, they are not subject to those caps. In Zone C, the red zones, very similar to the yellow, we will issue licenses to properties with a valid VHR permit, as well as those that have gone through the legal nonconforming approval process. So those will be the only two types of properties that would be eligible for a full short-term rental license in the red zones. The only exception to that rule would be for hosted short-term rentals and temporary short-term rentals. Those will always be eligible, and there won't be any limits or prohibitions on those two types of licenses. The license requirements will include an application fee. We are very close to finalizing that fee. So I'm not going to announce that right now because I don't want to spread information that isn't finalized, but we will get that information finalized in short order and up on our website to inform everybody as soon as possible. The license will require an annual renewal. So the license will be valid for 12 months from the date of issuance. It will not run by calendar year, but it will be 12 months from the date of issuance. Licenses are non-transferable. So unlike the legal nonconforming approval, where I said it runs with the land, the new owner would automatically sort of inherit that approval. The short-term rental license will not run with the land. So when the property sells, a new property owner will have to come in and obtain a new short-term rental license in their name. The difference here being that one is a land use approval where it runs with the land. The license is associated with the person. We issue that license to that particular person for that particular specific piece of property. And so if that licensee no longer owns the property, then the new property owner would have to come in and obtain a new license. And the license process will also require a self-inspection checklist to be completed. That form will be available on the website in the near future as well. And it will include some basic safety checks where we're going to ask you to inspect your property, ensure that you have the correct number and location of working smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, make sure there's a fire extinguisher on the property that is in working order. So basic life safety issues. We're not asking you to do a full building code inspection. Okay, I've mentioned the operational standards a couple of times. These apply to all types of short-term rentals, regardless if they're a full license, a hosted, or a temporary short-term rental. These same operational standards will apply. There's a maximum occupancy limit of 1 person per 150 square feet, up to a maximum of 16. The only caveat to that is that if you have a unit or a bedroom in a hosted short-term rental that is less than 300 square feet, we will allow you to have a minimum, 2 guests at the bare minimum for any type of short-term rental. We will be looking for some sort of documentation of your available parking and where the guests will park on the property for the short-term rental. So there will be a specific approved parking plan that will be included in a short-term rental license approval. We will ask you to designate a local responsible party. So that will be a name, phone number, and email of who is going to be responsible to respond to complaints regarding that specific property. And we have established a maximum complaint response time. So if a complaint comes in and if we notify that local responsible party that there is a loud party going on, or there's maybe a trash or a parking issue associated with their short-term rental unit, they have between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m., they have 1 hour to respond to that complaint and try to address it. After 10 p.m. and before 6 a.m., that time reduces to 30 minutes. So we do expect complaints to be addressed in a very timely manner. And the full description of those operational standards can be found in the licensing code, which is section 12-542 of the city's municipal code, and that is available online. In terms of enforcement, we will hopefully within the next month or so be launching a 24-hour complaint hotline. This is where those responsible party contact information is really important. That will all feed into that hotline. We do expect a response. A response will be required when a property manager is notified of a complaint. Any complaints that we receive, we will investigate. If we can determine that there's been a violation of city code, then once the licensing is all in place, we will refer those violations to a short-term rental hearings officer. That hearings officer will review the facts of the case, have a hearing with the licensee, and make a determination, have the ability to issue a warning, assess a fine, assess suspensions if warranted. And if it's a very egregious or repeated offense or violation, the hearings officer will have the ability to recommend that the short-term rental license actually be revoked. Those revocation hearings would be in front of city council, not in front of the hearings officer. So council would have the ultimate authority over any revocation. Short-term rental license applications are not yet available. I know everybody is looking and waiting eagerly to get that license. We are working really hard with our software vendor. In fact, I have a meeting with them immediately after this presentation. So we're trying very hard to get that live and on the website and available to everyone as soon as possible. The good news is that council did recently extend the grace period to get a license to April 30th. Previously, it was January 1st, so I know a lot of folks were getting pretty nervous about when the license application was going to become available. That deadline has been extended to April 30th. But there are some caveats to that extended grace period. It only applies to properties in the green zone, or if you're in yellow or red, you have to either have a valid VHR permit or you have to have an approved or pending non-conforming registration application. So if you have not already submitted your non-conforming registration application, please do so as soon as possible. Get it into us prior to January 1st, so that you will then be subject to this April 30th deadline, and you can continue to use your property as a short-term rental in the meantime. If you do not meet those criteria for the extended deadline, then you will not be able to operate your property as a short-term rental until the license application is available and you have obtained a license. Again, all of this information is available on our website, and we try to keep that updated. So anytime there's new information, it will be posted to steamboatsprings.net/STR. So I would just encourage everyone to check back to that website often for any updated information or frequently asked questions. That is the conclusion of my presentation. So I'm happy now to take any questions, any and all questions that may be out there. And we'll start, if you're online and you have questions, if you want to just raise your hand. And I don't know if you folks have any questions in the room. Okay, we're going to give you a mic just so that the folks online can hear you. I know, but we just want to make sure we're sharing information with everyone.
So I looked at the overlay maps, and not knowing how they were generated, it kind of looks like the city was painted red, and then there were areas that were carved out to be yellow and green. What was the criteria used to carve out those individual areas?
Well, there was a lot of discussion, a lot of thought and criteria went into that. Planning Commission worked on this for nearly a year, as well as City Council. So the green areas, the boundaries of the green areas were established to provide areas that were allowed for these types of lodging uses and resort-oriented uses in areas of town that support our resort economy and our tourist areas, commercial areas. So like I said at the beginning, they're sort of centered around the ski resort area on the mountain as well as downtown. The yellow areas generally created some sort of buffer in some areas around that. They were areas where there were a number of short-term rentals that already existed, and Planning Commission and City Council felt that with some limits, that those areas could continue to provide some opportunities for short-term rentals without having significant negative impacts on the residential character of those areas. And then the rest, the red areas, were neighborhoods and areas where Planning Commission and City Council felt were our more traditional residential neighborhoods, or areas that were of a character that were not compatible with the short-term rental type uses.
So, what kind of stands out to me is Sunlight in particular. They're separated from all of the other areas. The greens and yellows are concentrated, and I guess I get the downtown area, but Sunlight being kind of on its own island. So is there a process to reconsider certain areas within the red zones, and how was that accomplished?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the overlay zone is zoning. And so there is always a process for a rezoning, or a zone map amendment is what it is officially called in our code. That process can be initiated by the city at any time with, direction from City Council, or it can be initiated by way of an application from a specific property owner. So it would, to reconsider the boundaries of the overlay zone, it would be a rezoning application. submitted by the property owner. It would go through staff review, go to planning commission for recommendation, and then ultimately it would have to be decided by city council by ordinance.
So it starts with the zoning.
Yes. Yep. Okay. I can no longer see my participant list here. Oh, I got it. Okay.
If you need my help, just let me know. I can see it and I know whose
Okay,
hands
I
are up.
see it. Why don't we, Kathy, Battlementi? Did I say that correctly? You have your hand up if you want to unmute and go ahead and ask your question. Kathy?
Hi, this is Kathy.
Hi.
I'm in the red zone. I have 2 VHR licenses. They expire January 1st, 2023. My question is, do I have to renew these this year because you've extended the deadline till April, or just will these licenses then be extended through April?
Great question. So as long as your license was renewed and valid as of June 15th, 2022, which it sounds like yours were, then you are in good shape. You are now waiting. You are considered a property that's subject to a valid VHR permit. You are covered in the grace period. You will just need to obtain a short-term rental license for each property once that license is available. And you will no longer have to renew your VHR permits anymore. You'll just have to make sure you maintain a short-term rental license on an annual basis.
Thank you.
Mhm. All right, let's see, Josh Matthews.
Yes, I am a vacation rental owner in the red zone as well. And as far as the new alerts, or I was wondering basically about the alert system, or what the notification process will be for any issues or any reports involved, due to the fact that if it's still going to be email, the 30-minute response times just sounds like it's not going to work after before 6 a.m. and after 10 p.m. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So once we have the hotline live and ready to go, we're going to do quite a bit of public outreach, and we will be reaching out to individual licensees as well. So the way the hotline will work when it's fully functional. So I don't want to complicate things too much, but we are going to, at council's direction, we are going to launch the hotline prior to licensing being fully in place. So we will have the means to take complaints and follow up on them. So for the very near future, that notification will likely be email or a phone call the following day if the complaint comes in at night. So we will not have the means to hold you accountable to that response time right until, prior to you receiving a short-term rental license. So once you have a license and we know your contact information and that contact information is tied to your license, the hotline will call, text, and or email you immediately when a complaint comes in. And you will then have the ability to receive information on the nature of the complaint. You will also have the ability to respond to the hotline to let them know that you have in fact responded to the complaint.
Excellent.
And then that information will be saved, documented in our enforcement system. There may be follow-up the next day from a staff member to say, hey, we saw a complaint came in last night. We want to chat with you about that to determine if there was in fact any sort of a violation. But we understand to hold you accountable to those response times, you have to actually be notified. And so what we're going to be doing is sharing out that hotline number and ask that property managers actually add that to their contacts in their phones so that you recognize the number when it comes in and you know to answer it. And you don't think it's just a spam call coming in at 11 o'clock at night.
Excellent. Thank you.
Rick Dixon.
Hi there, this is Rick Dixon. We are in the yellow zone. with your map overlay, and we have maintained a sales license or a sales tax license certificate for a long time. We're not familiar with what is VHR. How do you determine if we have a VHR permit? We just have a sales tax license that we maintained for years and been compliant with that.
What type of a unit are you in? Are you in a single family home or a duplex?
No, we're in a triplex, so I guess that would
Okay.
be the multifamily.
Okay, so the VHR permit would not have been applicable to you, so you don't have I'm going to tell you, you don't have a VHR permit.
Okay.
So if you have been operating lawfully as a short-term rental, then if you have not already, you should be submitting a legal non-conforming registration application.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Marguerite.
Hello. So I have owned the house for 20 years. It was with a management company for 10, and I have been managing with a vacation home rental license for 11 years, and thought it was still, intact. When I looked, the person who had always sent the bill and sent the Barbara Wheeler, apparently they just stopped sending them a couple of years ago, like 2 years ago, and then COVID, when it was much harder to get in touch with anybody. So basically, I thought I had it. I have a sales tax license. I have the other documentation, and I'm about to submit that for the legal non-conforming. But I don't have, too much to my surprise, the VHR. They just never sent the bill again. I don't know if I'm unique in that situation or not, but yeah, the last 2 years haven't had that. And I'm a single family home in the yellow zone.
Yeah, we can maybe talk offline if you want to contact me offline, but if you're in a single family home, to have been lawfully operating as a short-term rental, you would have needed a valid VHR permit. Those VHR permits have always required renewal on an annual basis. So if yours has expired and lapsed, then you do not have a valid VHR permit, and you will not be eligible to obtain a short-term rental license unless there are available licenses within that yellow subzone within the cap.
But they always 10, 11 years, they sent the form, I sent the payment, I got it, and they just did not. I mean, I looked through all my files, there's no request for payment. I mean, that I've been compliant. I have a sales tax license. I've done it through VRBO, paid the taxes for 20 years. I mean, this is, a difficult situation that I was not at all aware of really until this, because I assumed that, yes, I still had it because I've always had it. So.
Right. And that permit always required annual renewal. So again, I think maybe it's best if you want to contact me and we can talk about this outside of this meeting for your specific circumstance. Because really the general answer is that you have to have a valid VHR permit to be, in your circumstance, it sounds like, to be eligible to obtain a short-term rental license.
Wow. Through no fault of my own, really.
Sam.
Hi, when do we anticipate the licensing regulations to be live, as well as the process to get licensed?
The license regulations are live. You can find a copy of those as adopted on the short-term rental website. I believe it's on the right-hand side. There's a link to all the different ordinances. There's specifically a link to the licensing ordinance. So you should be able to find that on the website. If you have difficulty, shoot me an email and I'll point you directly to it. And we are, as I mentioned, working really hard with our software vendor to get the software configured for the license application. I'm hopeful that will be live by maybe about mid-January.
Thank you.
Is that okay? Michael.
Hey, Rebecca. Yeah, first of all, thanks for putting this on. This is super helpful. And you've already answered a bunch of my questions, but I have two specific ones I'd like to ask. One is regarding midterm rentals. So rentals that kind of, exceed 30 days in length, but aren't quite like a 6-month or 12-month long lease. If we're doing midterm rentals and advertising on short-term sites such as VRBO or Airbnb, do we need to get any permit or license for that sort of rental? Or are we allowed to advertise on those websites?
Yeah, absolutely. You can advertise on those websites. We do not require permits for long-term rentals. So if it does not fit within the definition of short-term rental, you would not need a license. I would caution you though, to not try to game the system and advertise as a long-term, but rent on a short-term basis. Because that will be evident, and we will, we may, if we find you, we will take enforcement action.
No, absolutely. I only asked because we got a notice in the mail, and it was a screenshot of our listing on Airbnb. But if you were to go and actually try and make a reservation on our calendar, we don't accept reservations underneath 30 days. But my other question might negate that first one anyways. But so we are in the prohibited zone, zone C, and looking at applying for the legal non-conforming application. We began operating in, I think it was December 2021, and we operated all the way through June 15th. Will we still be eligible to submit that application, or did we have to operate for 12 months prior to June 15th, 2022?
No, there's no, you don't have to have been operating for the entire 12 months. You have to have operated as a lawful short-term rental within the 12 months prior to June 15th. So, but it sounds to me like you said that you actually don't do short-term rentals. So.
Well, we were doing short-term rentals, and then when these new ordinances came out, we started doing midterm rentals.
Okay.
But as soon as we get, I guess we'll, knowing this, we'll go ahead and apply for the legal non-conforming application. And then once we've got that, and once the software is live, we will make the bid for the short-term rental license as well. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hey,
Mark-
Michael, just
Oh,
wanted
sorry,
to
go
add
ahead,
real
Sam.
quick. Hi, I am the short-term rental compliance officer. Michael, if you could please email me. My email address is at the bottom of the short-term rental website section. If you could email me, and we can, have a phone call, and I'll go over the different documents you have to submit. That way, whether you apply or not, and then I can go over each step with you.
Okay, thank you so much, Samantha. I appreciate that help.
All right, Mark Williams.
So we've had our VHR and we're in the red zone since 2018. And one of the things that was required was when we got our license, they just changed the duplex law to have the approved parking plan. So I wanted to understand we already went through that process to get the duplex permitted to get our VHR. What will be the process of reviewing that parking plan? And then I had a follow-up question just on, we use lodge tax for our sales tax, but most of our bookings are through Airbnb and VRBO through a company called Evolve. None of them would sign that contract, but I sign a 0 return every month because it's done through lodge tax, just because I just wanted to make sure we're complying, but neither of them would sign this short-term rental sales tax. I think that's because you guys have a master agreement with both of those agencies. Is that correct?
When you said neither of them will sign it, are you talking about the affidavit?
Yes.
Yes. So the affidavit is not required if you're running your bookings through those two platforms, and if they are in fact collecting the sales
Okay.
tax on your behalf.
Perfect. All right.
So that's where those tax reports that you're able to download from those platforms provide us with the information necessary.
Okay. Perfect. So just my
and then
question
to
would be on the parking.
Yeah. So your question on the parking will be, I'm sure when you obtained your VHR permit, you had to submitted some sort of documentation on the parking plan. So I envision, we're going to get some guidance up on the website soon in terms of what the parking requirements and parking plan submittal requirements will look like, but I presume that what you have submitted in the past will likely satisfy the license requirement in terms of parking.
And in terms of that, with a valid VHR, obviously in a red zone, it's been pretty tumultuous the last 2 years having a license. And who will have the final say on parking plats in terms of parking plan being the city of Steamboat, or it will be, in our case, it would be Bear Creek HOA on those requirements with a grandfathered in VHR?
So when we review and approve a license, we will only be applying the city's codes. So did you, remind me, you said you were in a single family home?
A duplex.
A duplex. So I believe that the parking requirement for your property will be 2 spaces,
Okay. which
is the same as what's required for your duplex under our
perfect.
code, you know, if you
Okay.
were using it for resident, you know, your own purposes. So as long as you have 2 parking spaces, they're located either on your own property or on common property that you have, that, you know, that you are authorized to park on for your unit, then that would likely comply with our code and we will sign off on that. If your HOA has more restrictive standards or rules, it's really going to be on them to enforce those. We
Okay.
will not be reviewing against individual HOA covenants or enforcing on their behalf.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you for all your help with it. I know it's probably been a crazy situation, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. It looks like someone with the initials of SG.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. 2 quick questions. One on the legal non-conforming. I believe you said that's if as long as that's pending before the end of the year, we're good in the yellow zone. Is there a document we receive back when that is approved? I don't know if is there any documentation, or is that just in the city's system if it gets approved?
Yeah, when it's approved, you'll receive an approval letter from us. So you'll have that for your own records, and then it will also be in ours.
Okay.
You
And then
can, and then also, I just want to note, you can log into the portal at any time, the same way that you submitted the application. You can log in. There's a link that I think it says My Items. You can click on that. It'll show you all of your pending, or any application that's associated with your name will show up there, and you'll be able to see the status. So, you know, once it's approved, it will say approved, or file, you know, it may say file closed, which means it was approved and that we've completed that process. But you can check the status there. And then also you will receive an approval letter from Samantha.
Okay. I'll look for that. Mine's a little bit unique because we transferred ownership after it was submitted. So I'm actually not the one that submitted it. It was the previous owner. So I don't know if it'll go to the previous owner or not, but I've sent Samantha a note on that.
Yeah, if you email either Samurai, your name and the application number, or your property address, we can add you as a contact to that, which will allow you to go in and see the status.
I have been, yes, I have that. Sorry, I guess the approval letter, I don't know if I would receive, but if I'm a contact in there, I would see that as well.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then one more on the sales tax. I believe if I sat through a lot of the summer calls with the city council, there's a new sales tax associated with short-term rentals. 2 questions. One, do you know if Airbnb will automatically remit that? Has that been worked out that basically it's a different percent? And then second question is that applicable January 1st, or does that new sales tax slide back as well?
The sales tax, I believe that the 2 major platforms will collect that sales tax that would be subject to the same agreement that we've already had in place. So yes, I do believe they will be collecting and remitting that tax. I'm going to do my best to answer the tax questions, but that's really been handled by our finance department. So if you have additional questions, I would encourage you to contact our finance department for the sales tax technicians for specific, more detailed information. But my understanding is that the tax goes into effect January 1st. It will be applied. It applies to all reservations made after January 1st. So if there was a reservation made prior to January 1st, those would be exempt from that sales tax. Am I missing any piece? There may be a cutoff date of April something whereby even if the reservation was made prior to January 1st, there's some end date by which those reservations would be exempted from the tax.
April 15th.
April 15th. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. I appreciate it. And thank you for the time.
Yeah. Any other questions out there? Do you guys have any others in the room? Any other questions?
There's one online.
Oh, G Murphy.
Hi, I have submitted an application on behalf of an owner, and I wanted to double check that currently it says open, not pending. So as long as they're submitted, does that count prior to January?
It does. Yes, it does. As long as you can see it in our system, that's considered pending. And we will, you are subject to that extended grace period till April 30th. So it sounds like you're in good shape.
Okay, and I can submit an email to you with each of the application numbers, and you'd be able to add me as a contact so that I can see the status of each of these?
If the individual property owners, if you weren't the original applicant and the property owners were the applicants, if they consent to us adding you as a contact, yes, we are happy to do that.
Okay. And
You can go ahead. You can go ahead and email me, and I can get you all that information and walk you through the process.
Okay, thank you.
Amy?
Thank you. Sorry, and excuse my voice. We are located within the red zone, and we had a valid VHR permit. I was just quickly wondering about the grandfathering process, if we needed to do any formalized process. I think the deadline was January 15th. And so would you mind covering that quickly?
I would be happy to. Two things to clarify. So if you have a valid VHR permit, if your VHR permit was valid as of June 15th, 2022, then you do not need to go through the legal nonconforming or the grandfathering process. That permit is considered valid, and we will honor that, and you will be eligible for a short-term rental license. If you want us to check the status of your VHR permit, I'd be happy to do that. Shoot either Sam or I an email with your address and your VHR permit number, and we can just confirm with you that is in fact valid. Happy to do that. You had mentioned a January 15th date. This is something I should have mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. There was a recent story in the newspaper that came out after the council extended the deadline to April 30th. It did include an incorrect date of January 15th as a deadline for something that there is no January 15th deadline. I did reach out to the newspaper to try to get that corrected, and I think it's probably corrected on their online version, but unfortunately that went out in print. So there is no January 15th deadline that anyone needs to be aware of relative to short-term rentals.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's where my concern was stemming from. It was the first time I had seen that date. So if we had the valid VHR license, and then that's really what's allowing us to be able to apply for the short-term rental license
Correct.
by this April. And then we would just have to meet the other requirements that are stipulated. Is that correct?
Correct. And then you'll have to just renew that license on an annual basis. Similar to how you had to renew your
Okay.
VHR permit, you'll just be renewing a license instead.
Okay. And then, sorry, one last question. I feel like this has been covered. I've researched it. I've asked a number of times, but we worry about, of course, about that gap because we were, it was indicated to not renew those after this summer, and that we were just to, kind of continue rentals until this new short-term rental licensing process took place. So just confirming that.
Yes, you are able to continue operating your short-term rental during this grace period because you have that VHR permit. That is correct.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Francis?
Yes. I'm a retired, my husband and I are retired. We have a second home in the green zone. And we wonder, our daughter is considering renting it short term. Do we have to get a VHR license before we apply for a short term rental license?
No, we are the VHR permit has gone away. We are no longer issuing those. That's not even a definition or a type of permit that we have in our code any longer. So if you're in the properties in the green zone, short-term rentals will be allowed without limitation on number. And you will just need to obtain a license on an annual basis once that application is available. So there's nothing else that you need to be doing in the interim.
Until the license, the application is issued.
Correct. Yep.
Then she has to go through this process and have it done by April. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thanks for the hard work. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions online? All right, I don't see any other hands going up. Again, I just really wanted to thank you all for tuning in today in the middle of the day. If you have any questions, I would ask that you visit the website. Always happy to answer emails or phone calls from anybody to help clarify anything. Sam and I are both available. Sam takes the brunt of the volume of calls and emails, so please be patient. We're trying to respond as quickly as possible. But please reach out to one or both of us if you have any questions or if you're still confused. We want to make sure we get you get you some clarity and good information so you feel confident moving forward. And again, we're hoping to have the license application available and live about mid-January. We'll likely host one or more of these question and answer sessions at that time to kind of walk you through the license application process. Once we have it and we can put it up on the screen and show you what it looks like, we'll walk you through that as well. So kind of stay tuned for future Q&A sessions when we get to licensing. And thank you. I can't stress enough how much I thank you all for patience with us as we work through this. It's been a lot of work and a lot of change for everybody. So thank you. And have a great afternoon.